Teut's now finished with the bike, it's all set up and it does feel massively different already. So apparently he's got a little present for me because of my good behaviour. Oh, thank you very much.
There you go, get some of them on there.
So we've gained about 2 brake horsepower now. We've got some TW suspension stickers. I feel like when you're at the dentist and basically, you know, when you've earned some stickers at the end.
Oh yeah, you've been good.
Yeah, I've been good. Welcome to Jordan Morrison Racing. I love cars, motorbikes, anything with an engine. How do you guys? Welcome back to the channel, and this is the first video of 2020, and I'd like to just start off by saying thanks a lot to those that subscribed in 2019. You know, I got a lot of advice, a lot of feedback, and I really appreciate it. And although I'm a small channel with only 400 subscribers, going forward I'd like to know what you guys actually want to see, because I have no idea what sort of content is interesting you lot. So that's what I want to try and find out eventually from 2020, and then we can sort of gain more videos on that content. Motorbike stuff, well, I'm definitely going to be doing more of that because it is super addictive, and that is a bug that I can't get rid of. And that leads me on to today's video, which is getting the suspension set up on the CBR. So I'm going to a place in Preston called TW Suspension. Got speaking to a guy there, and he's basically getting the suspension set up to my weight. Now, in terms of track bikes and suspension, you can spend thousands, but for me as a novice, I'm just going to get it set up in the basic sort of standard form for myself at the moment, and that's it really. So cracking on, we're going to head over to TW Suspension, get the suspension set up today, and yeah, that's it really. So hope you enjoy, and we'll crack on. Bye. How do you, Teut? You alright?
Yeah, very nice. How are you?
Yeah, good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
so we brought my Honda CBR 600 for Teut to actually have a look and tell me what actually needs doing. I don't know whether this bike needs servicing in terms of suspension, or it just needs setting up for myself as a rider. As you know, I've done some track days already, but I have no idea about suspension and setup.
Okay.
Put it on the forum, and a lot of people suggested this place, and I've actually come into the workshop, the man cave, whatever you want to call it, and it's a pretty cool place. So do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself, really?
Yeah, obviously TW Suspension Tech, we specialise in all forms of, basically, we just specialise in motorcycle races, suspension for road and race application, off-road application. So basically anything with 2 wheels, that's what the TW stands for. 2 wheel suspension technology. Yeah. It's also a bit of a pun on my name because my name's Teut, German name, born in Germany, raised in Ireland. Wow. But yeah, so we do all forms of motorcycle suspension servicing, repair, tuning works, suspension setups. I'm one of the official suspension specialists at Thundersport GB. I've been there now with the 4th year running. Wow. And I support the paddock basically with technical support for suspension setup. So I'm setting up, I think there's about up to 300 riders in the paddock in the series. So you're not just based here, you are mobile? No, yeah, so during the race season, which will be kicking off in March, you know, a lot of this ends up in the back of the van, and then, you know, I'm doing mobile setups and trackside support, so I do
So you can end up anywhere around the UK setting up suspension?
Well, and, you know, UK circuit, so, you know, the first series ends up in a Brands Hatch, which is a long way to go. And then I think the second round will be Snetterton, so, and then they all start coming out a bit closer to home, which is a bit easier. So Anglesey, Cadwell, Oulton Park, Donington, you know. So yeah, so we go to all the tracks, and then I work with the riders, helping get them ultimately get the best setup for them in order for them to achieve their best results. Really.
And obviously here we're just talking about track stuff, aren't we? But you don't just do track suspension, do
No,
you? So
no.
for anyone that's watching the video that's like, oh well, I want my suspension setting up on my road bike.
Yeah.
Is that something that you do as well?
Yeah, we do a lot of road bikes. I probably set up approximately up to about last year was about 360 bikes in a year.
It's like a bike a day.
Yeah, it is pretty much. Pretty much. I don't do them all every single day.
Yeah.
I've got to kind of squeeze them in between my schedules and stuff, my workload and stuff. So I try to squeeze them in. But yeah, so you know we do a lot of setups for road.
Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of customers during the season do come from road. On the race side, when I'm on track side, obviously I do a lot of race bikes there as well.
So when we talk about suspension setup, are we talking about, especially with the road bikes for people, are we talking about the standard suspension setup, or are we talking about...
what you find is quite a lot of standard bikes that come out of the showroom, they don't tend to have optimum setups, and they can be quite far out actually. From
See, this
experience.
is something that I never
And
used,
yeah, people
so
don't appreciate it. So you'll go and buy a bike in the showroom, and you'll take it for a test ride, and you know it'll feel okay. But you might not necessarily, when you start getting confident on it and you're going on the roads, you just start finding the weaknesses in it. It might feel a bit too harsh, it might dive too quickly, it might not hold the line very well, so basically the reason people come to me is because they want the chassis set up properly, and it's really, in fact it's got to a point now where people actually say, I'm picking my bike up from the showroom on Saturday, can you squeeze me in Saturday afternoon?
It's like a priority to have
honestly,
the bike
yeah.
set up,
Because they've had it done before, with us, and we've set the bike up and they've gone out and they've had lots of confidence and lots of feedback. Sometimes it helps to get rid of any issues with being vague, lack of agility on the bike. Yeah. So they buy the bike and say the first thing they want to do is bring it here and get it set up. So that's where it's got to.
So that's like your bread and butter, isn't it? I suppose. And then really advancing from there, you then service the suspension, don't you? But also you can provide really fancy, expensive stuff as well, can't you?
Yeah.
If needs be.
Well, yeah, there's expensive stuff. There's stuff really there to improve suspension. That really suits a lot of different sort of budgets and pockets. So if you needed just a spring upgrade, that can be quite a cost-effective way. Yeah. Particularly because sometimes the road bikes come out, the spring rates might not necessarily be just at the ideal sort of rate for you. So we can do a spring upgrade, which is a cheap alternative to the first step in trying to get a bike set up properly for you. Then of course, if the damping in the suspension unit is weak, we can do revalves with piston kits, which then additionally give you better damping, better feel, better control, and of the suspension damping.
Suspension on a bike is one of the key factors, isn't it? This is what I'm learning. I mean, I've just started doing a track days, and people have mentioned tyre warmers, getting decent tyres. Yeah. Now I'm moving to the suspension, and I'm realising that it's actually a lot more technical than you think. Really, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there's quite a bit to take into account really when it looks at suspension. There's so many variables, particularly on the racing side. You've got to take a lot of variables in. But really, for road suspension, it's one of the for me, it's one of the priorities. Because I see bikes coming in here and they're so far set out, they're actually almost on the brink of being, unsafe. Yeah. So, for example,
and that's from a factory setup.
Well, yeah, if you had to do an emergency brake or you needed to change direction quickly, it might not necessarily be in the optimum sort of setup, and having it, because at the end of the day, you're like the computer on that bike. Yeah. So when you ride that bike, you're interpreting the feedback and everything that you get through the bike into how much throttle you're going to give or how hard you can brake. And if it doesn't feel safe, then obviously you're not going to be able to do what you want to do with the bike. So when that bike's set up properly, you'll feel confidence going into a corner. You feel like you can brake properly. You'll have better traction. More stability. You don't want to be going into a corner and it's pushing wide, because if you've misjudged it, you'll end up in the wrong lane. So if the bike's set up properly, it'll help you to hold the line that you want and get the bike to go where you need it.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I've come to you today, because I've done 3 track days in 2019 and I'm looking at sort of completing about 6 in a European track day in 2020.
Right.
Just getting my confidence on a bike, and someone said, get your suspension set up, it will massively help you. And what I found is when I've been on a track day, I've not had the time to get the suspension set up, because you're rushing, you're getting off a bike, you're getting ready for your next session, and I've not had the time. So I think it's great that I've been able to bring the bike somewhere, get the suspension looked at, get it set up today possibly, and then I can go out on my next session and I can give you some feedback. And
well, absolutely, because what I'll do is I keep a record of all the suspension setups, so I've got files here with suspension setups, so you know, go right back. In fact, I've got records from helping David Johnson and British Superbikes way back in 2004 or 5.
Okay.
You know, John Ingram when he was kicking off. You know, I've got data going right back when I was working with John Kirkham and stuff back in the day with Crescent Suzuki. You know, so yeah, so we've got loads of data, but I tend to keep all the files. But when I do your setup, I'll keep a record of your setup, and then when you're on the track, if it needs any sort of fine tuning, because I know the base setup with the geometry of the bike and where it is, I'll be able to then advise you over the phone, say, look, just add another turn of preload, or you know, maybe just add a couple of clicks of compression or whatever, just to fine tune it. When we measure your bike today, what will it'll give me a great picture to see where it's at. You know, obviously I think you're on stock suspension for now. So as you're progressing in the sort of on the track days now, you will eventually get to a point where you think, well, you know, you need to sort of maybe consider some upgrades.
So what type of tools and stuff do you use for servicing the suspension, sorting the suspension?
Well, obviously, the first thing that we need is the suspension workbench, which is a great tool for working on suspension units. It captures all the oil and contains everything when we're stripping it down. We have your whole range of specialist tools over here, which are all to suit the different suspension units, so that you can take them apart carefully without damaging them, get inside them to replace seals and do inspections on shims and so forth. Also have a vacuum machine there.
That looks very technical.
It is a little bit technical. It's actually fairly simple really, but it's almost a necessity really when it comes to bleeding shocks. It's a really handy tool to have. And vacuum bleeds the shocks, so it basically sucks all the air out of the unit and also out of the oil itself. So the whole thing's under a vacuum, and then when you pump then pressurize the oil into the shock. It's just a great way to make sure the shocks are bled properly.
I think one thing that scares people is suspension and it's taking it apart when it's under tension.
Well, you know, that's why you have the right tool for the job. We've got a spring compressor over here, so that's great for removing the springs quickly and safely. You know, that allows us to get to the actual suspension units themselves. We also have a spring rate tester, which is a sort of an essential tool really for me when it comes to measuring spring rates when we're setting bikes up. So you know,
it's a lot of advanced equipment specific for the job that you do then, isn't there?
Yeah, you know, it's just all tools that, you know, we would use, whether it be working in the back of a race truck at the sort of racetrack, or but everything, you know, I've got everything here that we need in order to do that. When we go out and measure your bike in a minute, you know, when I measure those sides and things like that, it'll give me an appreciation for how that bike is actually set up. So, and then we can sort of fine tune on the preload. The preload will then obviously adjust that until we get it in the windows that I'd like to have it in, and yeah, go from there.
Well, I think that being said, should we go and have a look?
Yeah, let's go and have a look and get the bike set up. Brilliant.